the State of Israel has said over and over again, the goals of this war are to free the hostages and to remove Hamas from power and remove its military strength. But the question is, are those compatible goals?
I fear not, although both are desirable goals. Israel was always going to have trouble achieving its aims the minute it allowed Hamas to kidnap so many people, but realistically, even one person. Israel cannot possibly expect to truly take out Sinwar and his closest assistants under the assumption that they're surrounded by hostages without sacrificing the hostages. Now, Israel is therefore placed before an excruciating and difficult choice. They can say, we're going to go after Hamas, remove them from power, destroy them fully, and if the hostages are in their way, we sacrifice the hostages. Some suspect that is in fact what they're doing without declaring it, even though they're trying to save hostages, obviously, but that they're prepared to go as far as that. If they're not, then it's going to be extremely difficult to achieve the ultimate aim of removing Hamas fully. And that is why we see, in fact, a war that degenerates into something of a low-intensity war of attrition that could last for many, many years. And that, in that situation, the debate becomes, well, should you not hurry up and do something, anything, because the hostages clearly don't have infinite time. And this touches upon the Philadelphia corridor debate.
Right. You
can leave the corridor, you can return to the corridor, but you cannot return the hostages to life if they die in captivity. And so I do think there is a pretty strong argument for doing whatever deal is doable now, including what Israel agreed to from the beginning, which is a pullout from the Gaza Strip in exchange for all the hostages in 3 stages and 10 stages, doesn't matter. But that's fundamentally the deal that is at hand. And I don't in any way belittle the danger of allowing Hamas that victory narrative, because they're going to claim victory if Israel leaves and they stay in power. The consolation for Israel is that you're dealing with despicable terrorists, and you can rest assured that they'll provide Israel a pretext to go back in and finish off the job, this time without one hand tied behind its back, the way it is because of the hostages. Now, this is an excruciating and difficult situation where Israel has to choose the least bad option, not a good option. I'm not claiming that deal is a good option, or that leaving the Philadelphia corridor is a good option. But an adult has to see the big picture and choose, in this case, as I say, the least undesirable. A desirable option does not exist.
I'm interested to hear what you have to say on this.
Well, the grand debate is not the Philadelphia corridor. The grand debate is, should Hamas be snatched from the jaws of defeat, or should Hamas be obliterated? The assumption that Israel should get first the hostages and then deal a major blow to Hamas whenever Israel chooses is very naive. It underestimates the IQ of Sinwar, who is satanically smart. There is no way that Sinwar would agree to any deal without a very, very firm public American guarantees which would tie the hands of Israel for years to come.
What you're essentially saying here then is that the hostages, the now 101 hostages that remain in Hamas captivity, are essentially going to become martyrs for the cause, which is to continue this war, understanding, what you're saying, that Hamas is not going to be willing to agree to any deal that would be favorable for the security of the State of Israel.
I did not say that. What I'm saying is that to avoid thousands and thousands of Israeli casualties
in the future,
in the near term, we must not appease Hamas. We must not make any gesture to Hamas, because we are in the Middle East. And in the Middle East, a party which makes gestures reflect weakness. Yeah. And weakness whets the appetite of terrorists. If we capitulate to Hamas, which is not going to be a supposed victory, it is going to be a victory for Islamic terrorism. It's going to ignite terrorism from Judea and Samaria, which would dwarf October 7.
All right, look,
I'm interested to hear your response to that, Dan.
Why not test this theory? You're saying Hamas won't sign a deal unless the deal includes terms that so limit Israel that it is onerous and would be foolish to accept. I say test that. what is on the table, in fact, is something that also may be appeasement, but isn't quite that, which is, as I said before, Israel sufficing with the degree of degradation it's imposed on Hamas, which is considerable but not total, and leaving the Strip. Now, that is not how I would have wanted the war to go, right? But it is an inevitable consequence of the strategies it's pursued in this war. Israel should have long ago, done a deal to receive most of the hostages, but probably not all, and then started to bring into Gaza an alternative government that would have prevented the current situation, which is that if Israel leaves, indeed Hamas remains in power. We have given this government a lot of rope. I have put myself in a state of considerable discomfort by going into this and other studios and defending the war in month 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 of it. But there's a point where it's gone on for too long, and that point probably from the perspective of Israeli public opinion is when it's clear the hostages are being sacrificed. It's been nearly a year of this tactic in which Israel has prevented numerous plans for bringing in an alternative to Hamas. It is pretty much guaranteed by its own foolish policies that when it leaves, Hamas remains weakened but still standing. And at this point, the choice is clear. It can do a deal or find reasons not to and sacrifice the hostages. Now, I do agree with Yoram that it's not about the Philadelphia corridor. The Philadelphia corridor is the latest Netanyahu spin. It really is about something else, which is implied by a pullout from the Philadelphia corridor. Does Israel pull out of Gaza or not? The Philadelphia corridor is part of Gaza, and Israel probably has a clear choice to make, where the moral choice is to do a deal now and then live to fight another day. I repeat, Hamas cannot be defeated, even though it's desirable, not totally, while they have hostages. And therefore, if Israel wants to defeat them totally, which is what you want, and also, frankly, what almost everyone watching probably wants, then that involves a sacrifice of the hostages. Now, Israeli public opinion right now doesn't want that, including about half of the right wing.
Now, you know, speaking of the Philadelphia corridor, if this has become the sticking point right now in recent discussions, we're going to hear Netanyahu speak again tonight on the issue. We know, obviously, that Hamas has been smuggling for decades arms through underground tunnels under the Rafah crossing within this territory through Egypt. The question is, why was this not more of a priority until now?
Well, the fact that a critical mistake was committed in the past does not mean that we should not rectify it in the present.
I guess the question is, I mean, Israel was aware that this was happening, correct?
Well, wasn't Israel aware that the PLO is driven by an ideology to annihilate Israel? So how come Israel concluded a reckless, suicidal deal with the PLO in Oslo in 1993? When you feed terror organizations, they always bite you. The Americans learned it when they supported Ayatollah Khomeini stabbing the back of the pro-American Shah of Iran. And the first thing Ayatollah Khomeini did was seizing the American embassy, holding 50 Americans hostages for 444 days. The Americans were the cause for the success of the Mujahideen to expel the Soviets from Afghanistan. And what did the Mujahideen do? Partook in September 11 and series of other anti-American terrorism. And Israel learned it when it enabled its arch enemy, the PLO, to come from faraway Tunisia, Yemen, and Sudan. And what did the PLO do? Unprecedented wave of terrorism.
All right. Dan, quick response to this. Very quick. One sentence, because we have to move on to our
perhaps
correspondent.
We should wait, because there's just so many things. But basically, Israel did a deal with the PLO to salvage itself demographically. Because if Israel didn't do a deal on the West Bank and Gaza to partition from them, then there would already be more non-Jews than Jews in Israel. And that was a fundamental reason. The comparison of the PLO in its current state, Fatah and the PA, to Hamas is current government spin aimed to delegitimize all Palestinians. The Palestinian Authority collaborates with Israel in the West Bank, prevents terrorism. Almost all the security establishment of Israel would repeat that deal. It is by no means analogous to the support for the Mujahideen or even for Ayatollah Khomeini, which was not quite so simple because the Americans didn't exactly support Khomeini. But beyond that, the Philadelphia corridor is certainly a nice to have, undoubtedly, because it is the Egypt-Gaza border, and the Hamas really did smuggle in arms, but the arms went through tunnels that began in Egypt and ended far beyond the Philadelphia corridor.
Right, and the question is whether that
and
military
soldiers in the
presence...
corridor, which is less than a mile wide, will be sitting ducks. The army doesn't want them to be there. That is the actual reason why they preferred other ways of preventing smuggling. That is why the Philadelphia corridor was not mentioned as a goal of the war, was not gone after for the first 7 months of the war, was not mentioned in Israel's own ceasefire proposal for May, and didn't even come up as a critical thing for the future of the Jewish nation until Netanyahu needed an excuse to
Okay, we're going to come back and we're going to continue this conversation. This debate that we were just having is one that we're really seeing had across the Israeli public as a whole. The question is, you know, what is it going to take for the Israeli public to have the influence on the Israeli government's decision-making, on Netanyahu's decision-making, if at all?
Basically, Netanyahu has, because of a series of tripwires that occurred in November 2022 that all fell in his favor, 64 out of 120 Knesset seats. There is a sense in Israel that there is nothing whatsoever that can cause that coalition to fall apart. You could have a nuclear bomb go off in central Tel Aviv and they wouldn't be impressed. There is really that sense, but it isn't quite so. Right now the polls show that about 70% of the public want Netanyahu to step down. About 65%, 65% would vote against the current coalition. These numbers are bad, but they're not catastrophic. They're not catastrophic enough, and it's quite consistent, so it's credible. It's not catastrophic enough to create panic in the coalition. If, as a result of the current debate that has really crystallized around a binary option that you heard in the debate just now between myself and Yoav, if as a result of this they start seeing polls that show 80% of the public support a deal instead of the current 70%, maybe 85%, at that point I would think the coalition really would start to fall apart. And in particular, the religious parties would start providing a counterbalance to the extreme right parties that are threatening to bring down a coalition if there is a deal. The religious parties might waver on this.
Right, because they do believe that the hostages need to be released.
Their discomfort is clear because they don't serve in the army and they're being pilloried over this. How can you support a pointless war that's being prolonged for political reasons that aid the prime minister when hostages are dying and you guys don't even serve in the army? Their discomfort is evident.
Yoav, I'm interested to kind of hear your take on this.
Well, the notion that 70% are for the deal suggests that 70% are against the war is misleading. Almost every Israeli wants the hostages back. However, most Israelis want Israel to persist in the attempt to obliterate Hamas. Most Israelis want the government to withstand American pressure and not to shift from the military option against Hamas to the diplomatic option against Hamas. Most Israelis are more realistic than the studios of the TV. Most Israelis are even more realistic than our top defense echelon, which was wrong on Oslo, wrong on disengagement from Gaza, wrong on the option of retreat from the Golan, which was supported by the entire top military echelon.
So, point by point, 70% clearly in every poll showed that they would like to do the deal. That's not saying they didn't support the war, not saying they don't want a perfect universe where the war can go on and get back to hostages, but when presented with a deal, which is an end to the war, perhaps and probably temporary, in exchange for all the hostages, 70% consistently in every poll without a single exception, including in the pro-Likud press, show that is the case. It's incontrovertible, undeniable, and carved in stone. Now, that is a problem for Netanyahu, which is why he invented a convincing-sounding series of arguments and maps involving the Philadelphia corridor, and it might be working, because polls show in recent days, after his appearance on Sunday, all of a sudden, people believe, a lot more than before believe, this once-forgotten Philadelphia corridor really might be critical for the future of Israel. So, right now, it's a political debate. As for the security establishment, among the most disgraceful things that you are now hearing from the Likud talking points, and forgive me, Yoram, for calling it disgraceful because I've known you for years and respect you and you're a good person, but this line from the right wing is disgraceful. Netanyahu is projecting a disrespect bordering on disdain towards the security establishment simply because, in general, the security establishment does not support the policies of the right wing for a very simple reason. The security establishment comes from a demographic in Israel that is generally secular, not all, but generally secular. They're well-educated. They're people who are really much involved in what's going on in the field. And such people want a partition from the West Bank and Gaza. They just do. That's all there is to it. They're not driven by biblical notions, and they're extremely practical. As a result of this, Netanyahu is trying to delegitimize the point of view of the experts on this matter, and this is part and parcel of a global campaign by the populist right to disdain expertise. Now, the people of Israel have, by and large, over the years, been willing to sacrifice a lot because they believe that their institutions have value. They believe that the experts in the security domain can be trusted. And when Netanyahu comes on TV, and we'll see if he says this again today in English, when he goes on TV and basically says the head of the Mossad, the head of the Shin Bet, the head of the army, and my own defense minister, all of whom are with the 70% who want this deal, when he says, what do they know because they supported this in the past and not in the past, and some of it is nonsensical, because they would support, and rightly support, the Oslo deal again. This is devastating to the cohesion in Israel that has enabled the survival of the country. To think they're doing this for political benefit would be shocking, except it's not.